What is up, Comics World? This is Splendopia, Rob Casey here, and I'm doing another G.I. Joe comic trade review. It's been a while since I've done one of these trade reviews. We got up through G.I. Joe trade issue number 3. This is number 4. This is another re-release by IDW. Before we get into it, I said in some of my previous issues I was doing a soft boycott on buying new comics. Last week I gave up on that boycott. I had boycotted for new releases for comic books for about 3 months. The main reason, or part of the reason I did it, was because of I would say the entire reason is the Mark Waid tortious interference lawsuit. The one comic I buy the most is G.I. Joe. Larry Hama's G.I. Joe I've been a big fan of almost my entire life. And I stopped buying new releases because I saw that he donated to Mark Waid's defense fund. Mark Waid blocked another YouTuber. Used to be called Diversity in Comics. Now he's called Comics Matter, with your boy Zach and Luna. And Zach is your boy Zach is a well-known controversial figure in comics right now. If you watch a video he releases yesterday, he talks about how he is disrupting the comic industry along with Ethan Van Sciver. They're crowdfunding comics. They're showing that that you can develop an audience for comic books in a different way, and they're disrupting the mainstream. And it's caused a lot of agitation and a lot of vilification of him and of Ethan Van Sciver. And then they've created this movement, typically referred to as Comicsgate, which has also been facing its own conflicts internally as creators try to develop their own books and kind of cash in on the cultural movement. So a couple days ago, or last Friday, the Mueller report was presented to the Justice Department. It's hard to say whether that's going to extinguish a lot of the political angst in this country. It seems like it's not going to. There's a lot of questions still surrounding what's in the report. But the president, at least is clear in the eyes of the Justice Department of wrongdoing, or at least that's what's been announced. So there's a lot of stuff going on culturally that's impacting this situation. What's going on with me is, I'm very much interested in it. I got into Diversity in Comics, or Comics Matter, with your boy Zach because of some of the reporting he was doing around Aubrey Sitterson and his G.I. Joe run. And so when I ordered some comics last week, I picked up some of the old Larry Hama books that I'd passed on. Basically, I let them sit on the shelf for about 3 months, and then went back and bought them. So I guess I've helped him out. I guess I guess I was gonna say backpedaled. I don't feel like I backpedaled. I feel like I took a principled stance. But I do love Larry, and I want him to do well. IDW has performed horrendously this year. The stockholders, shareholders, the owners of IDW, the investors, that's the word I'm looking for, are on the hook for massive losses last year, and IDW is seriously hurting. And I've bought a lot less IDW than I had in the previous couple of years because of all this controversy. So that's 4 minutes or so of me talking about the political situation in comic books before I get into it. Let's get into this book. This is a great book. You got another J. Scott Campbell cover. I've talked in some of the previous videos how I don't love J. Scott Campbell. Basically, I just don't love the faces. I think his style is good. The detail is amazing. Look at these pants. Oh, I wouldn't trade these pants for anything, but the faces are not for me. But that's who they went with for the cover on this. This is a much more enjoyable cover. Look at that shot. So that's the cover of one of the books. This is Classic G.I. Joe, Volume 4. We're going to get into it. I'm going to talk about as much as I can in this book, and as many different issues and different points as I can bring up, and try to just kind of blister through what's in here and try to encourage you to buy it. If you like G.I. Joe, you should buy this. This is a classic trade paperback with a lot of great stories. And this is an outstanding story, issue number 31. Of course, those are probably two of the most iconic characters in G.I. Joe. On the cover here, that's Snake Eyes and Destro. Snake Eyes in his commando look, Destro breaking into Snake Eyes' cabin. That's what this issue is all about. Fort Wadsworth. So we pick up with Yo Joe Brian. We pick up with Fred Broca. This is Fred Broca number 1. What he's been doing is spying on Fort Wadsworth. He's pretty sure that the Joe team is located there, but Cobra Commander hasn't really taken that too seriously. You see these kids, these chaplain's assistants sure have a lot of neat stuff. That's the G.I. Joe team is housed under the chaplain's assistant school at Fort Wadsworth. So everybody mistakenly believes that all this hardware, missile launchers, and the Wolverine are part of the chaplain's assistant group. Fred has been positioned across the street. He's been spying on them for a long time. Meanwhile, Zartan hooks Cobra Commander up with some intel. He's got the number for the C-130 that's dropping Snake Eyes to his cabin in the woods. And little does he know, 2 Awesome Joes, Airborne and Spirit, are sent out to kind of get his back, since G.I. Joe knows he's a high-value target, and they want him to have a nice vacation. So Fred, his alarm goes off in his house. He finds out there's Destro and Firefly waiting for him, and it's time to go on a mission. We go back and we see Snake Eyes at his cabin. He's wearing his kind of long-range recon patrol hat, boonie cap, and he's hanging out with his Timber the Wolf. This is our first appearance of Timber the Wolf in the G.I. Joe series. And you've got Airborne and Spirit, the 2 Native American Joes, hanging tight, watching over him. There's a secondary plot as Firefly and Destro in disguise here makes his way to the cabin. You've got Major Blood and Baroness. They're plotting an assassination using the Patsy Billy, all the way back from issue number 10. We've talked about Billy. We know who Billy is, but it's still more or less a mystery in this issue. So Destro and Fred, the Crimson Guard, and Firefly, they engage the cabin, and this is a lot of fun. It's a great kind of tactical issue. A lot of great action, a lot of interesting fun, and I'm just gonna kind of scoot through it. You guys, you should read that one. 31 is an excellent issue. Issue number 2 is kind of the aftermath of it. Over here, I just wanted to point this out. Editor Denny O'Neil, Jim Shooter, Chief of Marvel. These guys were shepherding these books at the time. These are great books. Frank Springer, he drew the cover. This cover, a lot of these covers end up making an appearance in the G.I. Joe commercials. Again, I've talked about this in other videos, but Joe wasn't, toys weren't allowed to be advertised on TV at the time, so Hasbro found like a get around by having the Marvel Comics advertised on TV. And this is one of the ones, that was advertised. What I think is kind of interesting about this is, Springer's, his Zartan face is a little funky, but the bikes, look how well the bikes are rendered, and you get kind of an opposite. There's a very similar cover in a couple issues where John Byrne draws it, and the detail he puts into the bikes is much more sparse. I'll show you. It's kind of funny. So these guys are kind of recovering, still kind of working out the fight. They get engaged by this character, the Softmaster. So the Softmaster is introduced. He's the Arashikage master paired with the Hard Master. Gives these guys an opportunity to make tracks. Meanwhile, we cut back to the pit. And then there's the additional storyline in Springfield. This is Billy wearing a Cobra Scouts uniform, which you may recognize if you were a Boy Scout. And in this one, you can tell from the commercial, this is the one where where the Dreadnoks attack McGuire Air Force Base and basically wreck a bunch of jets, which is kind of cool, kind of funny. I'm gonna move ahead. This is like the Kevin Smith story where the producer of Superman told him to throw in a bear. You know, when in doubt, you always got the you can always have your heroes, the old plot point twist where they have to fight a bear. Got Fred Broca here. This is Fred Broca #1, and Cobra Commander and the Storm Shadow. They're talking about why Storm Shadow is working for Cobra Commander. You know, he's protecting the identity of the killer of the Hardmaster. So that storyline is being reintroduced. So there's some kind of shenanigans in like Firefly and Fred Broca, you know, back at Snake Eyes cabin, and then over here there's the introduction of the new G.I. Joe team members, and that's Ripcord and Lady J. Hooking up over here, I guess that's Grunt and Scarlet. So they're being introduced to those guys the first time. Fred Broca is gotta go back a couple pages. But Fred Broca is killed. You know, he's desperate to stop the Joes, and is killed in this action. And we see a very, very kind of creepy and sinister and interesting moment back at his house, which we've seen a few times, and his kids. As Daddy shows back up, and it's like, you look just like him, but you're not our Daddy. This is the introduction of the Fred series Crimson Guards, or CGs as they're called. Basically, they've all had plastic surgery to look the same. And we're going to find out later that that this Fred series CG is actually somebody from Stalker and Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow's past. It's Wade Collins, a character that was in their long-range recon patrol in Vietnam. So that's a mystery that unfolds later in the series. This kid later grows up to be Sean Collins, who in one later G.I. Joe series is Kamakura, the ninja apprentice. But in the current G.I. Joe series with Larry Hama, he is a character called Throwdown, who is one of the two characters, along with Don Moreno, who replaces Snake Eyes. And in the current IDW run, Snake Eyes is dead, and there are two, as some G.I. Joe fans call them, Fake Eyes. The male Fake Eyes, who's Sean Collins grown up, and the female Fake Eyes, Don Moreno. So here's that great cover again, with Cobra Commander. And we get this assassination. Here's old General Iron Butt Austin. He's here at the pit. You know, you've got the Joes recovering in the hospital room. But Spirit has wrapped a bunch of towels in his bed so he can get some medicinal healing at the mall. And a lot of that is just a plot device. Oh, let me show you this panel. This is Larry Hama says he was always an SJW, and so this panel kind of proves it. I wish I wouldn't let people smoke in these places. It's a free country. If people want to poison themselves, they have the right. Yeah, that's not what's bugging Blowtorch. He's just worried about where all the fire exits are. So, yeah, that's funny. That's a bunch of funny different points of view about smoking indoors. Of course, all smoking indoors was banned by Michael Bloomberg about 15 or so years ago. So we also have Fred Broca. We have the Fred #2, who's out with his family, his adopted family, who's very they work for Cobra, or they know that they work for Cobra, but they're very uncomfortable with this like new like surrogate father that shows up. Meanwhile, Major Blood and Baroness are still plotting this assassination. You know, Destro wants to know what's going on, and Baroness says, "When have you ever trusted me?" And Destro takes off his mask to prove to her that he does trust her. and she faints. She can't believe he took off his mask. Spirit, meanwhile, in the mall, recognizes Fred Broca, and so they have to make their way. The other thing that happens at this mall in the chaos is Ripcord, Blowtorch, and Spirit meet Bongo the Balloon Bear. So Bongo the Balloon Bear is this character who continues to come back. There are a lot of coincidences in Larry Hama's writing. It's G.I. Joe is as much like a soap opera as it is like military fiction, and Bongo the Balloon Bear plays much into the soap opera over the next, I don't know, I guess I'd say like 20 or so issues. So they take Bongo's van. I'm going to spoil the surprise for you. Bongo is actually a woman named Candy. Candy, we find out, Burkhart. So back in Springfield, Billy's got the gun hidden in some flowers, and Storm Shadow, who's typically an assassin, in this panel stops the assassination. But Destro throws himself in the way because Destro is a man of morals and convictions, and the one thing he cannot abide is patricide. And that's kind of a clever way, I think, for Larry to throw in a 50-cent word for the kids to learn, as well as a big plot twist reveal. Billy, Dad, yep, Billy is Cobra Commander's son. We officially find out in this panel. Then, this is kind of a sad thing. I love panels like this because this is like the original 13 Joes. I love the look of them, but this is where General Austin tells them that they've done a great job defending freedom from Cobra, and it's time to make way for basically the 1984-85 series of Joes that are going to end up on the toy shelves. These guys are going to be relegated to pit duty from then on. And then here we go. Here we find out Bongo the Balloon Bear is actually Candy. And for Ripcord, it's love at first sight. This issue, number 34, is kind of it's kind of outside continuity, sort of an interstitial issue. This one I would absolutely recommend. This is one of the best issues in the line of G.I. Joe. You've got, it's real simple. You've got Lady J and Ace in the Sky Striker. You've got Wild Weasel and Baroness going out for a flight in the Rattler, and Shakedown. They basically both engage. So I'm going to flip through this one pretty quick. It's a very cool, very fun dogfight issue with a lot of hip details, a lot of great action. And to kind of spoil it, but you should definitely read it. This is the last issue, or the last page, I mean. They're both kind of making one last run at each other. Gun check, empty. And they both just, in respect for the great piloting and great dogfighting that each other has done, knowing they can't finish each other off, and they're both, too wounded to accomplish anything else, they tip their wings and salute each other's efforts. I really love that. I love that expression of honor and just like decency, respect for your adversary. A lot of that kind of stuff really comes through in Hama's work. Here's the John Byrne cover I was talking about. So this one, I like the way the dreadnoughts are rendered more. And I was told apparently he didn't want to draw the bikes, so he just this is how he blocked the cover. So you can pretty much just see the wheels and the lights. So here we go. This is another Dreadnoks issue. Dreadnoks on the loose. And some more aftermath. You've got a side story here of Clutch, Rock and Roll, and Breaker kind of going on leave. It's kind of fun because Larry had this mandate to phase out the old Joes and phase in the new Joes, and so he phases them out, puts them on pit duty, and then the next issue is about them. So he doesn't really do it. He kind of defiantly sticks with the old characters that he's introduced. You also see Zartan, so ZTN for Zartan 123. You see Zartan's holographic technology in play in this one. There we go. I'm going to kind of flip ahead. A little more destroying some jets. There we go. It's classic go-to Dreadnought action. Kind of repeating a bunch of beats. There's one. Yeah, there we go. I wanted you to see this panel. This is like, so Zartan's like disguise technology. There's kind of a lot of. It doesn't really make sense. It's sort of totally fictional and imaginary. But this is a representation of how it theoretically kind of works. You see Torch, he appears to be an MP, and it says, wait up, if you get too far away, the holographic disguise won't work, and you can kind of see him like getting outside the range of Zartan's holography technology. So here, let's go to the next issue. It's 36. This is another beautiful Michael Golden cover. These are the characters Doc, Cutter, and Deep Six. Deep Six's action figure sort of looks like an unposable Buzz Lightyear figure. It is commonly considered to be like the worst action figure in the original G.I. Joe line. It came out in 1984. It was one of my first. It had like, you could hook a hose up to it and basically pressurize or depressurize his suit in the bathtub, and he would go under and then rise. That was the play feature, but they didn't portray him like this in the comic books. This is how he looks in the comics outside of his dive suit. And so a lot of G.I. Joe customizers have created, customs of Deep Six in like his, shipside outfit, as have I. This introduces the Whale, which is one of the best G.I. Joe toys, one of the best G.I. Joe vehicles ever created. Very fragile. A lot of parts in it are really fragile and breakable. So it's really hard to find one in good condition these days. But it is very cool to play with. And so this is a kind of a totally aquatic issue. While those guys are in the Gulf of Mexico protecting the G.I. Jane freighter, Snake Eyes and his rubber mask and Scarlet are on the Staten Island ferry, but confronted by Fred number 2 and a few more CGs. Yeah, the Whale. I love the Whale. I have like a kind of a busted up Whale. I remember when my cousin got the Whale though when I was a little kid, and it was just like, just unbelievable. The Sky Striker is cool too because there's like a parachute feature with the seats, so you could kind of have your guys bail out or eject out of it. So there's more action here as Snake Eyes engages the CGs and Cutter and the Whale. Try to protect the G.I. Jane freighter. You got Torpedo and Snowjob there. And just to cut ahead, not to give too much of the action away. I think the action is like a lot of fun, but I'm going to kind of flip through it. Here you have Snake Eyes and Fred number 2, fighting this death battle. There's the Statue of Liberty. When I don't know if you guys remember, for a long time the Statue of Liberty was being restored, so you couldn't go to it, or it was under scaffolding. And then in this last page, as they fight Fred number 2, he notes that his mask is not a real face. Pulls it off, sees Snake Eyes destroyed visage, and freaks out, falls into the ocean. And in the 1980s, if you fell into the ocean off the Staten Island ferry, that would be a death sentence. That disease should probably kill him, but he will be back. And at the end of this, These guys, the freighter is destroyed, and they're looking for a pickup. They introduce what is definitely the greatest G.I. Joe vehicle ever created, the USS Flagg. It's a 7-foot long G.I. Joe USS Flagg, first appearance. Issue number 37 is the first appearance of, we got Footloose and Flint, and the Crimson Twins, Crimson Guards. Bongo, the Balloon Bear, pops back up with Ripcord. And at the circus, you have the Crimson, the leaders of the Crimson Guard, the Crimson Twins, Tomax and Xamot. This is kind of fun in this exercise. Lady J is meeting Flint for the first time. Flint will become Lady J's longtime boyfriend, both in the comic book and on the TV show. And so not everything in the TV show lines up with the comic book, but this is something that Larry does carry forward. This is another one that has a TV commercial associated with it, and I would really recommend anybody to go watch that on YouTube, because I think the animation on it's like really fun. One thing that's like especially fun is the mirror effect, the House of Mirrors effect that they have going in the TV commercial. And then look at this. Look at this gung ho. This is a bad angle. I'd fire the photographer if I was gung ho on that pic. Another kind of interesting thing about this issue is on the model sheets, they didn't have the Crimson Guard. It was a 1985 figure. They didn't have those yet. So for this issue, they rendered the Crimson Guards as in the style of the Hiss driver. So this is, if you look at this figure, this character, it's basically modeled after the Hiss driver figure, the driver that came with the Hiss tank. Not the Crimson Guards, but they are both red. Another kind of interesting thing, talking about the comic book versus the cartoon. In the cartoon, you know, if you hit one, the other one feels pain. So here we go. Yep. I guess this is carried out. So it's kind of the same thing. They kind of do the same thing, but he's yep, he knows that his brother is in danger because he feels like he's being choked too. So that's carried over, but it's kind of, you know, it's kind of inconsistent. It's hard to like play that game effectively or go to that well too much. I'm gonna just kind of pop ahead. I kind of said everything I want to say about this issue. Next issue, and this is a series, this is a Mike Zeck cover. Mike Zeck did a lot of the very best G.I. Joe covers. This is issue number 38, and I think at least the next several issues, Zeck does a cover. He does a lot of G.I. Joe covers throughout the run. Here we go, Judgment. This is the Billy's Tribunal, where they try to figure out who put him up to assassinating his father. And there's the usual suspects, but of course we know who actually did it. But Billy refuses to talk, so they hook him up with a brainwave scanner. This one's kind of cool because Hawk has a black shirt in here. This is like a very small thing, but customizers have created a lot of Hawk action figures with the black shirt, but it's just kind of you can see it's an error. It's like black there, and then in the next panel, it's colored green. But in this issue, these guys, Ripcord, Stalker, Gung Ho, and Roadblock, are sent to save Dr. Burkhart, Adele Burkhart, who is Lady Doomsday from issue number 1. And this is where we get a lot of Stalker philosophy. This is why Stalker is my favorite character. And this is like some of the stuff I love the most about Larry Hama. The philosophizing that he does. And here we go. He says, wrong. What you're fighting for, because they don't necessarily want to rescue her. She's Burkhart's anti-military, and they have like a negative opinion of her. And he says, wrong. What you're fighting for, let's take a look. I gotta study this. Is Burkhart's right and every other American's right to believe in whatever they want to, providing it don't hurt anybody else. Personally, I think Dr. Burkhart is an uppity, self-centered, pretentious old windbag, and if I even suspected for 1 second that our saving her would alter her convictions one iota, I'd lose every shred of respect I have for her. So that's hilarious. That's awesome. And it's a great philosophy for Stalker, and I wish Larry I wish Larry internalized that a lot more, because I've internalized that quite a bit over the years. Uh, Honestly, I feel like a lot of the philosophy that Stalker puts out there, I I've made my own. So here we go. We got Billy. They hooked him up to the brainwave scanner because they got to figure out who has poisoned his mind. But as they do, we end up learning a lot about Cobra Commander and his early days, and how he came to prominence. You know, Cobra is small now, but every day we're growing, and by this time next year, everybody will have his own uniform. Cobra Commander is like, basically, we got to get him out of this brainwave scanner because you guys are learning too much about me. Storm Shadow, meanwhile, like, takes the fact that Billy is protecting whoever set him up for it as a sign of Billy's like deep integrity. They mistake his integrity for stupidity. Their type always does. And he decides, you can, in this panel, he's making up his own mind to rescue Billy and take him under his wing. So here we go. This is back in the woods. We always have this guy, Recondo, popping up. Here's, they land, and Recondo is like the man on the ground. You got Billy, he's in jail, and Storm Shadow goes in to bust him out. Meanwhile, the Joes, well, this is kind of cool. This is like you can kind of imagine that this is like the kind of panel that Larry draws all the time. And then the Tucaroos pop up. These are the local natives that Recondo has been working with. They're going to help the Joes take out this installation and rescue Dr. Burkhart, while Storm Shadow is rescuing Billy. And Destro kind of lets it happen. Meanwhile, the Joes, and this is kind of cool, Duke is wearing like, these are like sort of like the laser pads that Flash and Grand Slam have. I kind of like this costume choice. This is like the kind of thing that I wish there was a figure of, or like is ripe for like a good action figure customization. They're busting into this Crimson Guard safe house. Well, the other Joes continue their mission. Kind of parallel story. So Destro tries to stop Storm Shadow, and Storm Shadow has turned traitor and rescued Billy. The CG house blows up. I'm gonna kind of pop ahead a little bit here. And who comes flying out of it but Xamot and Tomax and another CG. You got Snake Eyes is still, so even though we've got a lot of the 85 figures making their appearance, like Flint and Lady J, Snake Eyes is still in his commando outfit. He doesn't have his his ninja visor mask, and this is a look that I prefer for Snake Eyes. I prefer the commando goggles and mask. And then the twist, Ripcord is still in Sierra Gordo looking for Burkhart. But Bongo the Balloon Bear shows up and says, "This is my father's house." And this is like one of the coincidences I was alluding to earlier. It turns out, unbeknownst to all of us, that Bongo the Balloon Bear Candy's father is Dr. Burkhart, a prominent Crimson Guard. So there's another great Mike Zeck cover. Kind of a cool Repel splash page. And this is where, the action and the fight continues. Here's Dr. Burkhart. Storm Shadow and Billy in training. And, they rescue her. Tucaroos take a loss. Aye. pegged by sniper. Recondo is crestfallen. Here's a kind of cool shot at Cobra Commander in one of those Cobra thrones. You know, I love the hooded Cobra Commander. Different Cobra Commanders have great looks, but I love the expressiveness of the hooded Cobra Commander. It's kind of an interesting line here. The Americans got away, Gregor. Why are we so sure they're Americans? If they had been British SAS, we would have been dead. And if they had been Israeli paratroopers, we still wouldn't know they had been here. And nobody else has a team that comes close. So I don't know. Is Larry dogging the American Special Forces, or is he talking up the SAS and the Israelis? I'm not too sure with that one. Or maybe he's saying that the Americans value life more than those guys. Here, Recondo is gonna. This is going to be a ceremonial appeasement to the river spirits in the tradition of the Tukarus since they died. Stalker is now this is kind of cool. Stalker has like a this uniform where he's got the collar and the lapels is sort of a strange way to express his outfit. But he calls it a weird ceremony. His friends wouldn't want them getting zapped. We got no time for mumbo jumbo. So he doesn't take that religion very seriously. But one thing that Stalker always does is throughout the G.I. Joe series, he's like the point man on never leaving a man behind. So whenever they take a casualty, whenever somebody's killed on a mission, Stalker is always the guy that throws the body or throws the injured guy over his shoulder and makes sure that the body gets back to the States or back to, you know, its final resting place. So this is kind of an interesting beat for me because even though he does that, they don't have the Tukarus bodies, and he doesn't think much of this ceremony. But it's also just kind of, it's also just to give him a little back and forth with Recondo about this, and it's just a bit of cultural flavor. It shows us how much Recondo cares for the Tukarus and respects their cultural values. This is kind of a cool panel from Burkhart too. She says, "Sigh, I must be getting old. Soldiers seem more and more like little boys all the time. What am I saying? Soldiers have always seemed like little boys." And I think that's pretty hip editorializing. I mean, it is definitely true that we tend to have kids in their 20s fight our wars for us, and in my 20s I felt like Billy, who's probably supposed to be 13 in this picture. He's aged quite a bit in the last couple of issues since his assassination attempt. But now I'm an old 40-year-old guy, and 20-year-old guys look like little boys to me. So he says, "What happened to the snipers? Don't ask. The snipers definitely got theirs. Recondo got his revenge." And here's some questioning of Candy. Now that they know that Candy's dad is a CG, they want to know what she knows. And she appears to know nothing. Here you've got Dr. Burkhart really remorseful. She just wanted to help everybody out, and by doing so, she caused so much pain and death. So we're not fighting to have everybody think the way we do. We're fighting so that people can have the right to think what they want, even if they don't agree with us. Dr. Burkhart's got her opinions, and you've got yours. Somewhere in the middle lies an agreeable solution. That's the democratic system. It ain't perfect, but it's the best we got. Again, I would advise Larry to go back and reread Stalker's dialogue in this issue, and especially this panel. And that's what I'm going to say about that. So here we go. Got another great Zet cover. This is Roadblock. Roadblock is the #1 featured character on the issues of the original run of G.I. Joe. So what does that mean? He has the most cover appearances. And you can kind of see why. He's always shooting his Ma Deuce. He's got that great look. Big black guy, bald head, huge mustache, angry face, firing off a lot of hot lead. That's that's what we loved as kids, man. Guys shooting guns, helicopters, stuff blowing up, good guys fighting bad guys. That's the appeal of this elaborate soap opera, that was designed to sell toys that Larry has constructed. These are the Dragonfly helicopters. This is a cool play feature. So they're going to pick up the tactical battle platform. And so if you had the Dragonflies, say you had like 4 Dragonflies and a tactical battle platform, the Dragonflies have like winch hooks, and there are spots on the TTBP where you can hook them in, and you can perform this function. So this is like a plot beat, but it's also like telling the kids like, hey, you got these Dragonflies have this winch. If you get a couple friends together, you can have them pick up and move this platform. Here we have a Shipwreck. He's introduced on it. Shipwreck is not a big character in the comic books, but he's a massive character in the Sunbow cartoon. So he ends up being like one of the main protagonists. He's sort of like this, he ends up being kind of this like Han Solo-esque. The guy who did the voice for him kind of made him like this, like Han Solo meets Jack Nicholson, sort of heroic goofball or anti-hero. And I think the writers really enjoyed that characterization. So you see a lot of him in Sunbow cartoon. You see almost none of him in the original run of the Marvel book. And there's the look that I like for Snake Eyes the best, the commando mask. And so this issue, these Cobra, in this Cobra submarine, they have this like really elaborate plot that we come to realize while they're still questioning Candy. They've apprehended Buzzer here, and they're cutting loose the hydrofoils. So the hydrofoils are another one of the like best toys. Sort of like a foil, if you will, for the whale, in the way that the Rattler was kind of a foil for the Sky Striker. Also, just a cool toy, just like a really elaborate, great G.I. Joe vehicle that like still holds up, that you like want in your collection. Here's Barbecue. Barbecue also doesn't. He's also like very prominent in Sunbow. Doesn't make much appearance in the comic book, but he's in this one. Shipwreck's giving him a hard time. Like, what do we need a firefighter for in G.I. Joe? And Barbecue says, yeah, that's what everybody says until their house is on fire. And so here's the CG Dr. Burkhart. We're almost done with this issue. About 45 minutes in almost. So what he's been doing, what they've all been doing, the whole point of this plot in this issue, and here's Buzzer cutting loose. Candy is being held by the MPs, but now Buzzer's got her. They're trying to engage G.I. Joe and force them to fire off a weapon. I'm going to kind of go ahead through all this, like, here we go. Fire off a nuke. So they're trying to set off a nuke to stop this Cobra plot, but it turns out that is exactly what Cobra had in mind. This nuke detonates in the fault line off the Gulf of Mexico, and turns out it was Dr. Burkhart's plan all along to trick the Joes into blowing up the fault line. But why? And we're gonna have to get to the next trade to figure out why. I'm gonna give you a preview. It is to create a seismic event to bring into existence Cobra Island, and that is such a cool move. I think Cobra, like, if Paramount does more G.I. Joe movies, Cobra Island should definitely be part of, or the creation of Cobra Island could or should be part of like the dramatic thrust of those films. I think it's just like such a great reversal. Joe thinks they're going to save the day. They've actually played right into Cobra's hands, and blowing the fault line creates a geological event that brings Cobra Island into existence. The next couple issues, we're going to see the fight for Cobra Island and the fight for Cobra's sovereignty. I think I saw a question like favorite figures and vehicles. Like, Yeah, Beachhead and Firefly are like two of the best. You can't go wrong with those guys. Firefly is definitely one of my favorite. Stalker's my favorite, like all time favorite GI Joe character. I think the Whale is the best vehicle, but the Whale, the Hydrofoil, those two are great. Hooded Cobra Commander is one of my favorites. The Rattler's great. You can has like a lot of cool play features, like the vertical takeoff and landing wings, like battle damage panels, all kinds of good stuff. So that's it, man. That's classic GI Joe volume number 4. If you don't have this, if you want it, you should buy it. You should buy some of those issues inside, especially fight issue. And thanks to everybody for showing up. That's gonna be the end of this one. But I will have more comic reviews and GI Joe reviews